would you tune your hearts in this morning and hear what he has to say, because I believe that it could be life-changing. I really do. So I'll give you Stacy.
No pressure. Life-changing words, no pressure. No pressure at all. Before we start, and I'll, won't belabor this point, but during the prayer time before the first service, I really felt like God wanted to remind us this morning of the power of his words. The power of his words. In Genesis, God's words bring all things into existence. By his words, everything that we see was created. God says in the book of Isaiah, which is kind of our book for today, God says that, my ways are not like your ways. My thoughts are not like your thoughts. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, and so are my ways higher than yours. And then he goes on to say this. He says, for as the rain and snow come down from heaven and do not return there without watering the earth, making it bear and sprout and providing seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so will my word be, which goes out of my mouth. It will not return to me void, without accomplishing what I desire and without succeeding in the matter for which I sent it. God's word today, not my words, not Noah's words, not the words from the worship team. God's words have the power to change your life. Do you believe that? Right? Do we believe that God's words have the power to change how we think, to change how we live, to change how we behave, so that we can live the way that he created us to live, in ever-increasing joy, ever-increasing love, ever-increasing peace? We're going to be in Isaiah chapter 7 today, verse 14, and let's all read it together. The Lord will give you a sign. A virgin will give birth, and she will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. You can take your seats. Take your seats. Emmanuel, God with us. So I'm going to get right to it, and I'll just kind of give you the main point right at the beginning, and then we'll go back through so that you can follow along. But many of you have probably heard this verse, and are familiar with this passage, at least in part, right? This is a very typical Advent series passage that's shared a lot during Christmas time, and for good reason. But the main idea, the main thing I want to talk about this morning, God with us, it's not that it's just a name. It's not that it's just a role that a character plays in the biblical story, but Emmanuel, God with us, is one of the main underlying themes throughout the entire biblical story. God with us is much deeper than you think it is. And I'll show you, but let's just start with the passage. Okay, let's throw up the map. So the nation of Israel, at one time in their history, was a unified nation under King David. Took all the 12 tribes of Israel, made them a nation, and they were all unified. A couple of generations of bad leadership lead to that kingdom being divided into a northern kingdom called Israel and a southern kingdom called Judah. Okay? Northern kingdom is Israel, southern kingdom is Judah. Around 700 BC, there is a rapidly expanding global superpower called the Assyrian Empire. They're farthest to the north here, and they are starting to encroach on the kingdom of Aram, which is just north of the kingdom of Israel, which is just north of Judah. Okay, Aram and Israel come together. The kings of those two nations come together, and they say, hey, look, and remember, during this time, there's no democracy, there's no elections or anything like that. It's might makes right. And if you have a bigger army and you want to take land, you're going to take it. the Assyrian Empire is rapidly expanding. They are the world superpower. And so Israel and Aram come together, the kings of those two nations, and say, hey, look, we're gonna do a preemptive strike. We're gonna get to them before they get to us. And then they insist that the king of Judah, King Ahaz, who we'll be talking about, join with them in their fight. Now, the king at the time, the king of Judah, his name was Ahaz. He's not a model citizen. He's very wicked. Like, sacrifice your children to other gods wicked. But he doesn't want to go to war with Assyria. Again, they're the superpower. But by refusing to join with Aram and Israel, they're getting pulled into conflict either way. Because Aram and Israel then come and invade Judah, and they're threatening to install this new puppet king who will be more sympathetic to their cause and join them in their preemptive strike. You following this? Ahaz is caught between a rock and a hard place, right? Conflict is at his door no matter what. These two nations come and they're in his land, and he's rightly freaking out. This is the context in which this Isaiah verse, is spoken. So just hang with me. The prophet during the time is Isaiah. God, speaking through Isaiah, says this. He comes to Ahaz while he's worried about his kingdom collapsing, and he says, take care and be calm. Have no fear and do not be faint-hearted because of these two, God calls them, stumps of smoldering logs on account of the fierce anger of Rezin and Aram. Because Aram with Ephraim and the son of Remaliah has planned evil against you, saying, let's go up against Judah and terrorize it, and take it for ourselves by assault, and set up the son of Tabeel, this puppet king, in the midst of it. This is what the Lord God says. It shall not stand, nor shall it come to pass. God comes to Aham through the prophet Isaiah and says, hey, look, relax. You don't need to worry about these two nations, even though they're right at his doorstep. He goes on in verse 10. He says, then the Lord spoke again to Ahaz, saying, if you don't believe me, ask for a sign for yourself from the Lord your God. Make it deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, nor will I put the Lord to the test. Then he said, listen now, house of David. Is it too trivial a thing for you to try the patience of men that you will try the patience of my God as well? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. This is our text. Behold, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and she will name him Emmanuel. Merry Christmas. Now, it's possible that the young woman here, the virgin here that's going to give birth to this kid, is Ahaz's wife. And the son that she would bear would become Hezekiah, who, if you know your Old Testament, turns out to be a fantastic king, except toward the end of his life. Other people think that it's possible that Isaiah was referring to a son of his own, so one of Isaiah's sons, as a word of comfort. You can check Isaiah 8, 1 through 4. But no matter how you think about this, the prophet's word of comfort that came from God, again, God's word, was that neither Aram or Israel or any other nation for that matter, even the Assyrians at this time, would not overthrow him and his kingdom. He just needed to trust in God and believe this seemingly soon-to-be-born son as a sign. All he had to do was just trust in God. Another big thing. Now wait, why would God say this? Why would he promise a virgin giving birth and his name being called Emmanuel, God with us, at the time when he thinks that his nation is on the brink of collapse? Now, for us sitting here in 2023, on the other side of Jesus coming, we need to just really understand the concept of the Messiah. How many of you are familiar with this word, the Messiah? Handful of you? Okay, good. Yeah. For those of you who aren't, the Messiah. So through much of Israel's history, they were oppressed and in generally tough circumstances, we'll put it. Now, the Israelites held out hope for this promised king-like figure, this anointed one, who would come from David's line. Again, the king that unified their people. You know, King David, Psalms and all of it. That they would rescue them from their foreign enemies, from their bondage and fear, and that they'd restore Israel to the glories of their past. They were waiting on someone to come and make Israel great again. Make Israel great again. Yeah, you get it. You get it. Now, Ahaz's story doesn't really end well. In very few stories of the kings that come after him would end well. And if you fast forward 1,000 years from this moment, the Israelites are still under oppression, this time of the Roman Empire. So by the time we read in the New Testament about this new child being born that we read about in Matthew, in chapter 1, right there at the beginning, Matthew has already connected the dots and understands this prophecy. He says in Matthew chapter 1, verse 22, "Now all this took place so that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet Isaiah would be fulfilled. Behold, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel," which translated means God with us. And Joseph awoke from his sleep and did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and took Mary as his wife, but kept her a virgin until she gave birth to a son. And he named him Jesus. Wait, what? Like, didn't we just read? Isaiah says, hey, the virgin's going to conceive and give birth. He's going to name him Emmanuel, God with us. So why is Matthew saying that she named him Jesus? I've been following the Lord, since my early 20s. I'm 30 now, so like, better part of 10 years. And I've never picked up on this. For those of you who are familiar with this verse, right? Advent and all of it, great. Like, did you ever actually go look back at Isaiah's prophecy and then you see that it doesn't actually match up exactly with what you read in Matthew? So what's going on here that we're missing? In the 4th chapter of Luke's gospel, again, Matthew's connected these dots. Jesus pulls out that same Isaiah scroll, the one that has this Emmanuel prophecy and has a lot of other prophecies, and he reads one and he says, hey, look, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He's anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor and release captives and everything. Right? He's using all this Messiah language and saying, I'm fulfilling this. Matthew understood that this child, Messiah, King, was the same one that Isaiah spoke about 2 chapters later after chapter 7 and in chapter 9 he says, "For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace." Wait, hold up. His name is Jesus. What happened to Emmanuel and Mighty Counselor and Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God? Now, during Advent, we look back and we put ourselves in the shoes of these Israelites who were waiting on someone to save them. Someone who would deliver them from all of their enemies. And we, living on this side of Jesus, understand that Jesus didn't come to defeat physical enemies, but to defeat sin and death in the grip that they have on humanity. Right? That's easy enough to understand, right? You don't have to be a Bible scholar to put that together. But the world around us remains broken, right? And I think we can empathize with the Israelites during this time, during Isaiah's time, on a deeper level, because we're not waiting for the Messiah to come. As we kind of survey the broken world around us, we're waiting on the Messiah to come back. We are waiting for the fullness of Emmanuel, God with us. And that's it. And as I was preparing, I was like, okay, that's it. I get it. Wonderful. Great message. It was all pointing to Jesus. The whole thing's about Jesus, right? The whole Bible. There you go. That's if you wanted the plot. But like I said, God with us, Emmanuel, is much deeper. It's much deeper than that. God with us, again, is or one of the main themes throughout the entire biblical story. Right, okay, so let's step back, think about it. So God is love. You've heard this before, right? If you haven't, he is. God is love. When you love someone or something, let's stick with someone because people are more important than things. When you love someone, don't you want to just spend time with them? Just be with them? Or am I the only quality time person here in the room? Right? If you love someone, you want to be with them. So my grandpa, great man, not just because he's named Stacy, but great guy. He loved his family. Very natural for grandparents. They love their kids, love their grandkids. All he wanted to do was be with his family because he loved us. We were little images of him, right? You get where this is going? Just wanted to be with us. I found out the extent of his love for his family after he died. I learned that in the latter part of his life, when he kind of realized that he was, death was more imminent, he went to, bought his tombstone, designed it, Woodford, which is just weird to see, your name on the tombstone, because I went to go see it recently, Stacy, we share a name. And the inscription is, together forever. Right? Cute. That's not weird. That's not the weird part. It's not even the weird part. It's just the extent of his love part. Together forever, Stacy and Beverly, my grandma. And then I learned that before he passed, he so badly wanted to be together forever with his family. He buys grave plots for he, his wife, his 6 kids, their spouses, their kids. And I don't know if you bought enough for our spouses too, so we'll have to figure that out when the time comes, right? But that's it. When you love people, you just want to be with them. In my grandpa's case, forever. Now, how much more would God desire to be with those he loves? The little images of himself. Let's see. Look back to the garden. Again, this is throughout the whole storyline of the Bible. Look back at the garden. Genesis 1, God creates the skies and the land, and he all the creatures and all the birds of the air, all the things, and then he creates these little images of himself to rule and reign according to his design and his definition of what good and bad is, or what right and wrong is. They lived in perfect relationship in a garden that was literally called delight, Eden. This is his design for humanity, God with his people. Happily ever after, right? Wrong. Because we have the whole rest of the Bible, right? Wrong. These little image bearers, humanity, they're tricked, they're deceived into willingly walking away from the giver and sustainer of life and everything good. Now, how many of you know that if you turn away from that which is good, you're only going to get bad? And that's what happens. From the beginning until now, people have turned away from God, and yet God seeks them to be with them. He moves closer. So that at another critical point in Israel's history, God brings his people out of slavery in Egypt into a different place. This is the story of Exodus. This is Moses, Pharaoh, the 10 plagues, and then splitting the Red Sea. You guys know the story. If not, it's great. Book of Exodus, second book in the Bible. God so badly wants to be with his people, so then he sets up this other Eden-like space. It's called the tabernacle, or the tent of meeting. And it's beautifully designed, and there are all these specific instructions about how it's to be made, and it reflects all this imagery of Eden. Because why? God was trying to get back to this place where he is with his people, like in the beginning. They turn away, and at another point, he says, look, okay, we need to restore that. We need to get back to that. Gives them a new law, the 10 Commandments, this new way to live, this new way to be human. Maybe people will finally live at peace with God and each other. In Leviticus 26, 11 and 12, God says, I will set my tabernacle among you, and my soul will not will not hate you. I will walk among you and will be your God, and you will be my people. Again, trying to get back to the Garden of Eden. But you and I know what people are like. Not anyone in this room, but like people out there. Right? They're selfish. Right? They're prideful, arrogant, like deciding for themselves constantly what right and wrong is in their own eyes, according to their own understanding. And everyone else is wrong. They know what's right. This is exactly what the Israelites did in the wilderness. See the books of Numbers and Deuteronomy. God was trying to get them to go to this promised land where they could enjoy him and be with him in perfect relationship, yet they continually turn their back on him. They reject God in the same way humanity did in the garden. And then what? What do you think happens? God comes even closer. Later on in the time of the kings, Solomon, King David, his son, Solomon builds this temple. And he fills it with even more Eden imagery. There's gold, there's all these continual sacrifices, and there's just imagery of Eden all throughout this temple. Deep into the holy of holy places, and God's literal presence didn't travel around with him in a portable tent. It had a permanent residence with his people. Again, we're getting back to that Eden picture, or at least trying to. God with his people. Maybe then people would live at peace with God and trust in him. Wrong. The people continue to rebel, continue to decide for themselves what is right and wrong. They rebel, God comes closer. They rebel, God comes closer. They worship other gods, God comes closer still. Do you get this picture of he's chasing after his people so desperately? And they constantly are drawn to other things. That's why they're always oppressed. They end up in oppression for their history because they're enslaved to these other gods that oppress them. Again, God desires to be with his people. So then, after the temple, he does something unthinkable. And this is where we revisit our Advent text. He says, I'm sending a different kind of temple this time. And here's a clue. A virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and she will name him Emmanuel, God with us. He sends himself wrapped in human skin as a person named Jesus. The picture I have here is it's the result of some British forensic experts and Israeli archaeologists who collaborate and, try to give us the image of Jesus. Here it is, if you're ever wondering. I don't actually think so, but he sends Jesus, right? In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Other translations say he tabernacled among us, right? And this is what we've been preaching in this series, Jesus with his people. Jesus teaching us. All these prophecies, all throughout the entire Old Testament, are pointing to this one person. He's the plot. That's why he's our number one value. We're obsessed with Jesus. Everything is about him because everything was made through him. It's for him and to him. Paul says he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. How many of you think that if you would have been able to walk with Jesus, that and see him do his miracles and teach all that he did, that maybe your faith would be a little bit stronger? You'd think, right? People still sat under his teaching. They saw all of the miracles he performed and still killed him. So what would you do if you were God and your people who you are constantly pursuing, so much so that you humble yourself and become like one of them, and they still turn from you so much so that they kill you? Like, you'd think you'd be done with them, right? God says, look, I'm not just going to live with you in a portable tent or in a permanent temple or even in a way that you can understand as a person. I'm going to send my very being to be in you. Jesus said, I'm leaving, but I'm going to ask the Father, and he's going to send a helper, an advocate for you to be with you forever. The Spirit of truth. That's why we sing so much about all this fresh fire and fresh wind. Like, this is all because we need him. He's personified as that in the story, in the biblical story, and we need him here today. And I love it. I love being at 614, and it's great to hear all of you singing and making much of Jesus and asking him for help to restore us and to heal us and to lead us into better things like he promises. But how many of you know that we still struggle with the three enemies of our soul, right? The world, the flesh, and the devil. Are we ever going to be finally back to that Eden place where we just live at perfect relationship with God? Well, if you flip to Revelation 21, from beginning to end, Revelation 21, verse 3. God said through the prophet John, I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be their God. Very similar to the Leviticus verse. Whether back in Israel's history, or here today, or in the end when this finally all comes to its fulfillment, God's desire is the same. From Genesis to Revelation, God with us. God with us. So who cares? Now what? Great, Stacy. What do you do with it? Cool. I believe you're convinced that God desires to be with his people. But what do you do with it? Right? This is just like an idea. What do you actually do with it in our lives today? I think in the midst of this Christmas season, during a time of celebration and like anticipating the Messiah not coming, but to come again, I think you receive this truth, like this is his word again, the same way you would receive anything else, like as a gift. Like if I were to give you a gift, I can't make you take it. And maybe you might not because you don't trust me. You can accept it, or you can reject it. And I'll invite the worship team up. in a time where people are lonelier than they've ever been, according to the Gallup polls, or dealing with, or maybe this holiday season isn't so like celebratory for you because you're reminded of who's not there this year that was there last year. Right? The holiday season can bring a lot of emotions. What do you do with this? Every generation has the same opportunity set before them that humanity had in the garden, to either lean into God and trust in his word, or turn in any other direction to listen to anyone else's words and trust in that. You may not feel close to God. But Lord only knows what anyone in this room is dealing with. You all look wonderful and happy, and I'm sure you are, but I know that just life is happening to all of us right now. What do you do with this idea that God is with us? You just have to receive it. And so, just close your eyes for a moment. And worship team, you guys can come up if you are not already on your way. I don't know what's happening in your life, or I don't know. God knows. And I do know that he's constantly speaking to each of us. The question for each of us now is, what is he saying to you? What is he saying to you? If you've never committed your life to Jesus before, I'm confident in saying that's what he's saying right now. And if in this moment you recognize that you've been turning away from God's design for your life and you want to turn towards back him, I want you to come down and pray with me. I'm going to be right here in the front. Or if you are a believer, if at some point you ever did commit your life to Jesus and you're doing the best that you can to follow him, what is he saying to you now? What is he leading you to now? Is he calling you to forgive someone who's wronged you lately? Is he calling you to ask the forgiveness of someone that you have wronged lately? Is he leading you into a new direction this next season, the next year? I don't know what it is for you, only you do. But I would encourage you to not take his words lightly. These are the same words that can speak things into existence. Maybe there's some things in your life that need to be spoken into existence. Or some things in your life that need to be subdued with God's help. Some things that are weighing on you. Get that sense this morning. Like, maybe some of us just feel like weight. Like weighed down. By God knows what. If you're feeling weighed down, like that's not God's design for you, just open your hands. Just like Noah had us do at the top of this. Just open your hands and just receive from him. You're going to get to your next Sunday plans. You're going to get to your week. don't miss this moment to just accept, receive what it is God is trying to give you in this moment. God, we thank you for your word. We thank you that you speak to us and that you're constantly speaking to us. Thank you that your desire is to be with us and to give us your peace and rest. Help us to see you more clearly. Help us to see you more clearly. In Jesus' name. Amen.